Hi everyone, I'm Steven and today I'm using cardboard to make Thor's hammer Mjölnir. Let's jump right into it. Off camera I made a template. It's a bunch of pages and can be found on my website. The link is in the description of this video. So all the shapes in the template were cut out and then taped onto cereal boxes. Using scissors and a utility knife, I cut out all of the shapes. All of the solid black lines are cut lines, but the dotted lines, they're fold lines. For the fold lines, you only want to score lightly on the cardboard without cutting through. This very shallow cut line lets you fold the cardboard easier and with straight lines and help give the pieces their unique shapes. For all the cutting, I always started in the center and then worked my way outward. This just helped keep me organized and helped keep the template piece together since you're cutting through paper. Taping down the template pieces was easiest for me, but if you don't want to waste all that tape, feel free to just cut the shapes out and then trace it onto the cardboard. That works too. Anyway, here's a little montage of all the pieces being cut out so you can follow along. And I just want to reiterate, I'm not cutting through the cardboard on any of the dotted lines. I'm just lightly scoring it. All of the pieces in this build are cereal box cardboard, except for these little corner pieces. They're going to be cut out of corrugated cardboard. Once you're done cutting everything out, you'll have a stack of pieces just like this. I also have two more of the fancy looking end cap pieces, but I didn't cut them out right now. I waited until later on when the glue was drying, just to help fill up some of that downtime. But yeah, I laid them out and then folded all along all those scored lines. And as you can see, the scored lines make it very easy to fold. So fold everything up. Then I grabbed two of the long side pieces and hot glued the corrugated cardboard pieces onto these two sides. Each corner gets two of these corrugated cardboard corners, and because of the way that they're cut out, they fit right into the corners and allow the corners of the box, aka the body of the hammer, to slant inward. It's best to glue these pieces slightly recessed away from the edges because it makes gluing on the end caps much easier in the next step. I'll let this video play a little bit so you can see how these corners are glued in. Watching is going to be much better than listening to me explain. Basically, these corrugated pieces are the support for the entire hammer. As for the handle of the hammer, I used a tube from the center of a roll of tinfoil. It's that firmer type of cardboard tube, not the flimsy paper towel ones. If you have a wrapping paper tube, that would probably work too. I took that tube and pushed it through the hole in the bottom of the hammer, and it was a very tight fit, but that was exactly what I wanted. I wanted it to be really tight. Inside the hammer, the handle pokes through a little bit, and I added a lot of hot glue around it so the handle stays in place without bending back and forth. This took a little patience, and I really had to focus on keeping it steady while it dried so it wouldn't dry crooked, and once it dries it's actually pretty sturdy. So I put that off to the side and moved on to assembling the end caps. I folded all the scored lines again, but this time I used tiny bits of tape to hold the end cap pieces together. You see these little flaps? Those will slide inside of the hammer. I put white glue all along the flaps and then tucked each of those flaps into the sides of the hammer. This took a little fiddling, but it really was not hard. The key was just to trim the corner flaps to be the same length as the distance between the edge of the hammer and the corrugated cardboard corner that you hot glued in a few steps ago. The flap will kind of just sit on top of those corrugated cardboard pieces and help keep the end cap from sinking into the hammer. I hope that makes sense. I let that dry completely before using more white glue to glue on the decorative end cap. Once again, this took a little fiddling to make sure it's even when it was on the end cap, especially since all these very thin pieces are delicate. But that's exactly why I used white glue for this, so I can move it around before it instantly dried. If I had used super glue or hot glue, I wouldn't be able to fiddle and it would have glued in the wrong position. If you make this, do not soak it in white glue. You don't want the wetness of that glue to warp the thin cardboard because the cardboard absorbs some of that liquid and you don't want it to get all wrinkly and everything. So just a very thin layer is all you really need, and just wipe off the excess with your finger. So I let all that glue dry completely before doing the other end cap, and again, let that dry completely. So now that the two end caps are built and glued and dried, it's time to decorate the body of the hammer. I started with the bottom covering. It's the piece of the template with the two long, thin rectangles that are cut out. I finished cutting the small hole in the center of it, and then I slid that onto the bottom of the hammer to make sure that it fit. When I was happy with that fit, I spread a thin layer of white glue and pushed the piece into place. Since the sides of it are folded up a little bit because of those scored lines, I used a little tape to help hold it all together while the glue dried. And I just made sure not to push that tape in too hard so it wouldn't rip up any of the cardboard. Speaking of glue drying, in order to fill up all that downtime, I started work on the circle top cap. This circle piece is a stack of 4 pieces of cereal box cardboard that were hot glued together. I glued the stack together first and then cut it out. Once that circle was cut out, I taped on the circle template that had the Nordic writing written on it. This writing should say,
"Whosoever holds this hammer, if he be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor."
But I don't exactly speak Old Norse, so I definitely can't verify that this writing is accurate. However, I did find a picture of the actual Mjölnir, and this was the writing on it, so that's what I'm going for anyway. Anyway, I traced all the letters using a pen. I made sure to press down really, really hard so an indent would be left after I remove the template. When the template gets peeled off, I use a pen to fill in all those indents. And after a little bit of patience, all the letters are written out in a perfect circle. By this time, the glue had finished drying, so I took one of the side panels, trimmed it to fit, glued it on, let that dry, and then did the other side the exact same way. Trimmed it to fit, glued it on, let it dry. While the hammer dried, I grabbed another cereal box and cut off one of the sides with a little doubled up layer. See, it's the doubled up portion that's on the inside of the box. There's no need to cut out 2 strips if it's already done for me. I took that strip and hot glued it securely to the bottom of the hammer, wrapping it around about 3 times just to give it some heft. Because that cardboard tube is not as long as the actual Mjölnir hammer, I'm taking some liberties with the bands that wrap around it. I cut out a little squiggle of cardboard, then cut out 6 more for a total of 7, and then pretended to know how to measure. You can ignore all the pen marks on the handle, you can kind of see that I had problem measuring, but after a few tries I decided to keep all the squiggles roughly 1.2 inches apart, and according to Google that is 3.048 centimeters apart. Each one was hot glued into place, and then I scraped off any of the hot glue that had kind of squeezed out of the edges. Super glue probably would have been easier, or white glue if you had the patience for that. Anyway, like I said, this handle fit 7 squiggles. If you want a movie accurate handle, you're going to need to get a longer tube and glue on 10 squiggles. I moved on to gluing on the decorative end cap on the top of the hammer. I used my template piece from when I had originally traced this out, and you could see this little faint circle, so I just roughly cut out that circle, put the template piece on top of the hammer, and then really roughly sketched out where that circle was, so I knew exactly where to put the glue. And I hot glued down that circle. As for the handle's decorative end cap, I sketched out a design, wrapped it around the handle, and then cut it out of cereal box cardboard. Since this design is not flat and has decorative edging, I also cut out those tiny edged pieces from more cereal box cardboard. I pushed all those tiny little pieces off to the side and decided to extend the handle just a bit by gluing on some corrugated cardboard circles right onto the end of it. One of those circles had a little gap cut into it, and I'm going to use this gap to stick in the hand strap later on. With the handle extended, it was time to glue on the decorative end cap. Hot glue glued down the base of it, and white glue for all those decorative edges. Okay, the end is in sight. For all the decorations on the hammer end caps, I wanted to stamp them on, but that didn't work out like I planned, so I freehanded all of it by writing big loopy swirly V's with my hot glue gun. I did the same for the handle, although I was definitely a little bit messier with it. Yeah, a little messy. The only thing left in this build was the hand strap, and I just used tape for that. I folded tape onto itself and cut the ends of the strip so they taper inward. And then it was on to paint. The first step of the paint job was to paint the cardboard Mjölnir entirely in black craft paint. Then the handle and wrist strap were painted in 2 coats of brown craft paint that I had mixed in a little bit of red. This brown and red mixture helped brighten it up and make it look really nice and warm and not so dark and black. As for the rest of the hammer, you guessed it, just silver craft paint. It was painted with 1 coat of silver, and to paint it on, I just used long brush strokes so it would look more realistic. If I used short brush strokes, you would see the brush strokes and it would look choppy and ugly and not nice. So just long, clean brush strokes. When all the paint was dry, I used white glue to glue in the hand strap, just in those little white holes. I just tucked the ends in and add a little bit of white glue there, and that's enough to hold it. If you're worried about it snapping off, just use super glue. But finally, the last thing I did was use a black pen to rewrite all the Norse words on top of the hammer, and with that, I was done. Now, on to the glamour shots. So there you have it, Thor's hammer Mjölnir made from cardboard. I really love how it turned out, and I hope you guys like it too. I made this twice, so I really hope you guys like it, because I disassembled the first one to make the template. So if you want to make one, it's not actually hard, it's just a little time consuming. As always, the template is linked in the description of this video, and feel free to drop a comment if you actually make it. Anyway, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this one, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye bye!